You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I am Sherry Lip, the marketing manager at Stimulus Technologies, and I am here with Nathan Whitaker, our CEO and founder of Stimulus Technologies. And today we are going to be talking about data organization and AI. Welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Sherry. This should be an interesting topic because we've mentioned these items quite a bit on the podcast, but hopefully we'll clarify a few things that we've said in the past.
Yes, definitely. And we've talked a lot about what AI can do, but we haven't really talked about this end of things. So, what are we talking about when we're talking about data management?
Well, I think the first thing to realize about preparing to implement any AI system is you really have to focus on IT and data organization first, because AI systems are very hungry for data inside organizations, and it has to be good and accurate data. What we're talking about when preparing to implement an AI type system is that you need to make sure that you know where your data is, who owns the data, and that the data that you have is up to date and accurate. I'm sure any organization that's been around for more than a couple of years has data all over the place. And it could be, in shared drives, it could be on people's computers, it could be in inboxes, it could be, data that was 20 years old. I'm sure, we've been around for 30 years. I could find quotes that I did in 1999, and that will not help me train an AI system to provide better quoting information to our customers. So it's really just understanding where your data is, who has access to it, and making sure that it's accurate and up to date.
Why do we care about that so much? What are we doing with the data that we need to make sure it's organized?
Well, a lot of AI systems can link to existing data to train the internal model, and also using the AI system to search for information and provide accurate feedback to your employees that are using the AI system. So, for example, Microsoft Copilot will link into your SharePoint data, call it OneDrive for business often. And that data will provide information to the AI system that it will use to generate responses to the prompt. And so if you have good data and good information, the prompts are going to be accurate. But if you have bad data or old data or inaccurate data, then the information that it gives back is going to be inaccurate. So think about it as if you have a new employee coming on board and you suddenly sit a binder down in front of them that contains, maybe let's go back to the quoting information, old sales data, inaccurate quoting information, maybe old packages that you have, but mixed in there is the current stuff that you have and maybe some old logos and new logos, and it's all in this binder, but you put it in front of a brand new employee that's never worked for your company before and say, "This is what we do." And then suddenly they go, "I don't understand, what you're doing. It just doesn't make sense to me." And that's basically what you're doing to these AI systems is giving it a bunch of data to look over, and it really doesn't know what to do with it. It's going to be lost and just give you inaccurate feedback when you ask it to do stuff.
And do you find that people kind of just assume AI will be able to sort this sort those kinds of things out on its own? Because I was just having a discussion this morning with somebody, and they're like, "Everything I AI just tells me is wrong." And
Yeah,
I'm like,
I think that's the assumption, right? Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
AI is just gonna work through it and know exactly what it is. And if you go back a while ago, I think I made the comment in a podcast that AI is just a really smart, well-intentioned intern. And if you've ever worked with like a college student or a high school student that's interning in your office, they really want to do good work, but they just don't have, the wisdom of what the information means. And so just expect the AI is going to take, as we say in computer science, garbage in, garbage out. If you provide it with a bunch of garbage, it's going to just give you garbage out. And that's what happened, with a lot of AI systems, especially the earlier ones, is they were trained on, the entire internet. And we all know that there's a lot of inaccurate information on the internet. Whether it's people write blogs that doesn't have accurate information, maybe contradictory data that's out there, and AI systems are going to use that and they don't know what's the source of truth. And so that's why you get maybe old data, inaccurate data. I was reading a comment on a blog the other day, and it was saying, well, if you search this information up in AI, it's going to give you something that is kind of old, it's inaccurate. And that's really true. It's the AI know what it knows based off of the data that's been put in. And so, messy data, disorganized data is just going to cause a lot of confusion, whether it's external, information that it's gathering, or internal information that it's trying to use to provide your staff with responses.
So when we're talking about what we're using AI for, if it's something like Copilot, is it just using our data or is it using a combination of other data and your data?
So, like Copilot has been trained. It's a ChatGPT model or OpenAI model, and it's been trained on the real world. But it also Copilot ingests the data that it has access to internal. So you could say something like, I want to see what I've quoted to XYZ customer in the past. And it would search through, if you're a salesperson, it would search through all the quotes that might be stored in Word documents, PDFs, things like that, and maybe provide a summary of what quotes you provided to that customer in the past. And and that's internal data. Now, where this gets a little tricky too, I haven't brought in security side of it too, is you don't want that same salesperson to say, can you give me the payroll data for the owners of my company? And if you don't have the right security set up in your data, it might be able to pull P&L reports or payroll reports that are stored in HR or executive data and give that to a random person inside your organization. So this really gets down to, like I said in the beginning, data organization and data security so that the AI system only has access for that user to the information that should be supplied to that user. And it's the same issue. We've gone in over the years to clients or prospects that want to become clients. And one of the things we generally look for is data organization and making sure that they have security set on drives inside their organization or data storage locations that separate by employee type. So I have an example that I went into this company one time and I did an automated search, and I brought up a report saying, that all employees have access to your executive drive that has, confidential data in it. And he said, no way, no, our employees don't have access to that data. And that drive does not show up on their computers. And I said, well, let's go over to one of their computers with one of their logins and see what we see. And sure enough, the drive wasn't there. Let's call it the E drive, the executive drive, and it didn't show up. But I said, watch this. I went to the server icon in the network. I double clicked on that, and then the executive drive showed up. I double clicked on that, and that user had access to their entire data because even though the drive wasn't mapped, they were able to get to it another way. And so, just having that data security set up properly, even for the user to access it is dangerous if it's not set up correctly. But even worse, AI systems are going to search that data and provide those searches back to the users with all the context of all the data that it has access to. So it's you just have to be really careful about data security when we're talking about this too.
So can we, when we're using something internally, an AI tool like Copilot within a company, you can set up kind of those same kinds of parameters within the AI system?
Yeah, so that's what's great about Microsoft Copilot is because it lives in the same Microsoft Azure cloud system that SharePoint lives in. The same data security settings that exist for SharePoint for your data storage exist for Copilot. So if you have an executive share in SharePoint and only your executive team have access to it, then when a non-executive person does a search using Copilot, it will not use that data to to give responses to a non-executive person. So it's already built in, the structure is already built in, and that's what's really nice about the enterprise Microsoft Copilot versus going with a ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that, that data security is already built in. Now, you can link your Microsoft SharePoint with ChatGPT, and generally those same securities will be set up because it's just accessing the SharePoint data that you have access to, or your Google Drive, or whatever cloud-based storage you have access to. But again, you just have to make sure that data security is set up in advance so that those AI systems cannot access and search through the entire archive of the company data and provide confidential information to employees that shouldn't have access to it. Now, they could get access to that regardless, because if they had the ability to access it through AI, they would have the ability to access it directly. So it's just, this is an IT problem, not an AI problem that you have to deal with.
Is that something, organizing that kind of data into access levels? Is that something we help businesses with when we're helping them with their AI?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we do in general as an IT providers. We'll sit down and, help the leadership of the company, managers or leadership, define how the data should live inside their organization, and then we'll set up the proper structure. A lot of times this happens when you're migrating data, from one system to the other. It's just ensuring that the data is set up correctly. I remember back in the day, a lot of companies, just for ease, they would have like one share on the server, and then they would put a folder in there called HR data, and then the HR team would just dump all their files in there. They're like, oh, the employees won't go into HR data, but sure enough, that HR folder was accessible to everybody, and so we started defining clear definitions. We'll separate these shares out, and then now we can do it a lot clearer with cloud data. So this is something that we help companies organize and talk to their leadership team or their management team on the best way to organize the data for the company, and set specific restrictions on who has access to that data. We can give feedback and provide counseling to the organization on how to best practices, but a lot of this is up to the organization to tell us, look, we need an HR share, we need executive, we need accounting, we need sales, marketing, and these are the people that should have access to these different shares. And so when you onboard a new employee, a customer should tell us, or you should tell your IT department, this is the data that we want our employees to have access to, or this new employee to have access to. And this should be an ongoing communication between the management team and the IT team on what data is accessible by whom inside the organization.
And of course, that's important even if somebody's not actively using AI, or they might not think they're actively using AI, but it's kind of integrated into so many things now, especially Microsoft. So could people be using AI without really realizing it?
Well, you're not just Microsoft, for example. Copilot showing up in a lot of their tools, the included Copilot. But you got shadow IT that's happening, that you might have an employee that goes out and gets, starts using ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini or something else, and says, "Oh yeah, sure, link it to my SharePoint." And suddenly now they have access to all that data. Or search my computer for the data, and suddenly they have access to all the data they have access to. So you might not think that you're training AI systems, but your employees might be doing it without your knowledge. And I think we have an episode about shadow IT, and setting policies around AI and making sure your company has that policy. But it's because a lot of this is now just purely online and on the web, and users have the ability to link their accounts with these systems. The question is, do you really know who is using AI inside your organization, and what access are they giving to maybe public AI systems? So that's something that you have to be really concerned or careful about, of what your employees are doing. And it's important to set a policy and work on enforcing that policy across your organization on what AI systems are allowed to be used inside your organization.
So we might have answered this question in that podcast, but anybody listening might have had this pop into their mind. Can you set up something that employees cannot make those links?
There are ways inside, especially if you're using Microsoft SharePoint inside of Azure. There's certain licensing that you have to have with Microsoft to do those restrictions, and so usually you have to be on Business Premium or Enterprise, the an E3 license to have a lot more granular access to be able to set those restrictions. There are some tools that we have that allow for that too, but it's best if you're doing this kind of work, and I recommend for most small businesses now to move to Business Premium so that we have a lot more granular control over how their account's set up and what capabilities they have to do inside their Microsoft 365 environment.
And is there a way to make data so you can't copy and paste it? I mean, somebody might just copy and paste it into ChatGPT or something like that. There are programs I can't copy and paste, like in Zoom, that's outside of the company and stuff like that. Can you do that?
There are tools to restrict it, but it starts getting really difficult, and I think that's where the policies need to be in place. That if you're finding employees are doing that type of thing, that this is an HR issue more than a technology issue, because you want your employees to be able to work efficiently. I mean, just copy and paste is an important function, and it gets down to the question, like, just even copying data or emailing data to yourself, things like that. I mean, we get these questions periodically: is how do you best control data being exfiltrated from the company, unless you want to set up clean rooms and be the NSA or CIA or FBI type security inside your organization. You have to have a certain level of trust that your employees are going to follow the policies that you have set up, and if they're not, that you have some teeth inside your employment agreements or employee handbook or whatever they've signed to become on board with your organization, that there's some disciplinary action that could be taken place if they violate those policies. So you can create IT policies that cause and wreak more havoc on the organization to enforce a well-intended policy. So I recommend to start with a good policy and a good organization and good employees, then have to make sure that IT is enforcing draconian measures across an organization.
Well, I imagine training is probably an important role in this because somebody's probably, if they're copy and pasting or emailing information, they're probably just doing it to help make their life easier than they're trying
Right.
to do anything wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. Employees are just trying to figure out a way to do their work and get their work done quickly. And I've certainly seen that a lot. That they'll email it to themselves so they can work on it at home. But now you have data, maybe confidential data that's living on multiple computers. So just listen to your employees on how they work and make sure that you're giving them access to the tools that they need to get their job done, and not finding ways around the systems that you put in place.
And to kind of wrap it up, how do we help businesses? This is new for us too, a new component of what we do. How do we help businesses know that their data is ready? How do we help them know they're ready for AI?
So one of the things we do as part of an IT audit is analyze, their system, where their data lives, their data security setup, and so as we help customers on board with us, that's something that we go through: is, where's the data, how organized is it, is there right security that's set up where the data is stored, and ensure that we have a good plan going forward, whether or not you're going to be implementing AI systems or not. You want to make sure that the data is organized in a way that works well for your team and that it keeps your company secure. So again, I started, I think, with this comment at the beginning: this is not an AI problem, this is an IT problem. And it's just important to start off thinking with good IT solutions in place, because that will set your organization up. Whether or not you're using AI, you'll be in a better position moving forward, just to provide great customer support, customer experience, and also employee experience inside your organization.
All right. Well, thanks, Nathan. Thanks everybody for listening. If you have questions on this, we're always happy to help.
And thanks everybody for joining us. And Good luck out there. It's interesting as you're dealing with all of these different nuances of implementation in the future.